Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, March 8th, a special post-election roundup, and we are joined by our high-powered panel of top local journalists, Gwyn Lurie, editor-in-chief of the Montecito Journal, Josh Molina of Newshawk, and many, many other endeavors, and Dale Francisco, columnist for the Santa Barbara Current and for Newshawk. Thank you all for coming. Well, the big story, we still don't have the final chapter written about, which is the first district supervisors race, where I think it's fair to say many people, including me, were surprised by at least the election night results, where Carpinteria City Council member Roy Lee now stands 687 votes ahead of Supervisor Das Williams, with hopefully the final count to come this afternoon. So by the time you watch this, you may know more than us than we do right now. But Gwyn, let me ask you this. You and I made no secret of the fact that we supported Roy Lee in this election, and we can get it in the reasons for that. But were you surprised how badly Das underperformed on election night?
Yes, I
Thank you
was.
very much. That concludes our broadcast.
No, I was stunned. I mean, I was stunned. I mean, I had no idea how this was going to go, honestly. I didn't, but I think that there was a real tone deafness obviously going on in the Williams campaign, because I don't think they had a sense of how many people were feeling unfavorable towards DOS. So I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think no matter what, it was a strong showing for Lee.
Yeah. Now, Dale, you served with DOS for many memorable years on the city council. So you know him as a colleague, I'm sure. Were you surprised by how this thing went, whether it was Roy's strength or DOS's weakness?
I was surprised, of course, but I had that hope in the back of my mind. You mentioned, Jerry, at the last a recent interview, and somebody had said, "Oh, of course Lee's going to lose," and you said something. Well, it might be like Trump in 2016, and it might be. I mean, we don't know. We still don't know as of today what the final results are going to be. But if Doss is off the Board of Supervisors and Roy Lee is on, speaking from a narrow, selfish Republican point of view, there really couldn't have been a better outcome. And the little bit of precinct walking that I did this time around, very little, every Republican I talked to was an enthusiastic Roy Lee supporter. So, and I don't think it was just an anybody but DOS reaction. I think Roy's story, immigrant family coming here from Taiwan, starting as a dishwasher, age 14. Now he owns the restaurant. He's on Carpinteria City Council. He listens to people. That's a great story for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
Josh?
I add something to that, Jerry, really quickly? You okay with that? I know you're the host of this show. I don't want to interrupt your plans.
When I would never try to speak over or mansplain to you.
I can't even write mansplain around her. She'll call me on it.
I just wanted to say that no matter how this turns out, my hope is that the local party really looks at this, and other candidates really look at other politicians really look at this, because I think that there's been a lot of very cynical behavior inside the party. I think the fact that you have a challenger like Roy Lee, who's been on city council for 8 years, who doesn't even get interviewed for the Democratic nomination.
Who is a Democrat?
Who is a Democrat. And by the way, as I said in my piece, even if the justification was, well, this guy isn't experienced enough to work at the county, what do you have to say about Laura Capps 4 years ago? She didn't get an interview either. And they conducted their interviews before the deadline. And I think what that says to the public is, we're not really trying to look for the candidate that's going to serve you the best. we're trying to look for the candidate that's going to serve us the best. And that is not, I don't think, at the spirit of what our local party should be. And finally, I just want to say one thing, and then I know I'm monopolizing here, but the idea that all of the Democratic politicians who fall in line and endorse DOS because they have to, not because they want to, is no different in my mind than what goes on in the Republican Party when we criticize Republican politicians for lining up behind Trump, even though behind closed doors, they're bad-mouthing him. And I really don't see any difference there. So I hope everyone looks in the mirror a little bit after this.
All right. That's a good line. I'm going to steal that line about we're not looking for the candidate who's going to serve the public best. Josh, you interviewed Darcel Elliott, the chair of the local Democratic Party, whose part-time job is working at the county for DOS. She had a lot of weird things to say, I thought, and in a certain sense, kind of showed why people are so unhappy with a whole bunch of them. What was your takeaway from that interview?
Well, I do want to say some things about what Gwyn said, but first, I think that Darcel and Dost, and as we record this, are hopeful that the votes are going to come their way. So they aren't really ready to fully sort of explain how we got here. I think that what Darcel told me in the story was she wanted to focus on the 3rd district, and she felt that 3rd district was the biggest at risk for the Democrats. So resources went there, and she delegated the campaign duties to Spencer Brandt, who is also an employee of Doss Williams, and I guess he took a leave of absence. So she wasn't throwing him under the bus, you know, by telling me that. She was saying, you know, I'm his chief of staff, and if I do his campaign, people will say there's a blurring of everything, Jerry. And
Which otherwise wouldn't be there at all.
So she wanted to really focus on the 3rd district, and she said she left the campaign to Spencer. And so how we got here was they're really happy about the 3rd district, and the 1st district, they're stunned, they're surprised. There's a little bit of a, I don't know if betrayal is the right word or deception, because Darcel also said in my story that the feedback they were getting from their paid canvassers was that these people were saying we are voting for DOS. And then the results did not indicate that. 60% of who they talked to, Darcel said they were going to vote for DOS, and these were likely Democrat voters. Remember, Dems don't try to reach conservatives or nonpartisan. They try to reach Dems. They just want to turn out the Dem vote. And so either those people didn't tell the truth, or they dropped off their ballots at 7:59 on Tuesday, and those are the ones that are going to come in later today and switch everything around. So I thought that was interesting. Also, I think that she told me that there were half the number of paid canvassers that Doss hired, or his campaign hired, this time than when he ran against Laura Capps. So I think, to go back to Gwyn's point, is whatever happens, if Doss ends up winning by 100 votes, he underestimated Roy Lee, and that was a huge tactical error. And even if he wins, I don't know that he'll ever overcome that, because this has left a mark on him. And people now feel as though he's vulnerable for his next campaign. And of course, he'll run a very strong campaign next time if he wins. Even if he doesn't win, he will be back. And he's going to raise a lot of money, and it's going to be an entirely different campaign. But to go to Gwyn's point, I've got a cell phone full of text messages, which I'm not going to name names, from people who endorsed him publicly and were very happy to, who are very happy to see the results on election night. And we all do. And that's the hypocrisy that Gwyn is pointing to. This is why people like us, we take the fall in the media, like, oh, you people are all against DOS. I don't think we're against DOS, like the person, but we hear from these people who tell us these stories. And privately, they want DOS to lose. And publicly, they want him to win. And that's very frustrating. So I hope that there is some sort of reckoning within the Dem Party to say we need to actually be inclusive of everybody. And my last point is, I was at the Dem Women Party. I did not even go to the Doss Williams party. I went to the Dem Women and the Roy Lee party. And there's a power shift happening. There's a power shift happening with the Santa Barbara Democratic women. It is very clear and it's obvious. And everyone was there. Everyone but Doss. Everyone started their night there. And this is huge. So I think the long-term story of whether Doss wins or not, and he probably will win. He probably will come back. The long-term story is we've witnessed a shift in the beginning of a shift of the balance of power within the Democratic Party. And great job to the Dem women, all of those people who are behind that and organizing that, because this is what it should be. It should be about inclusivity for all candidates and not just one candidate and one candidate's ego.
Yeah. Well, let me just make two quick points building on what you say there, Josh. I mean, your point that they don't reach out to Republicans or independents. I mean, that's exactly right. There's no persuasion to it. They're not trying to persuade people they only want people who already agree with them. And if you don't, you're not worth our time. And then the other things, all these points that Darcel made, it's all Spencer's fault. She was too busy in the third. She won the third. Forget Mary Rose. And all these people are Trump voters who voted for Roy. They're all organizational, but they all sort of miss the main point, which is on policies, on personality, and on politics. Doss Williams bears responsibility for this first and foremost. And that's the one thing that they'll never mention.
Well, and on top of that, Jerry, didn't Doss 4 years ago say, if Laura Capps can't beat me, no one could beat me?
He did.
He said that, which is very much like I could stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and get away with it. And I think that this is a real wake-up call. Adam Schiff had a press conference the other day, I heard him speaking somewhere, and someone said, well, you're going to win. It's California. And I thought he had the right answer. He said, you know what? My attitude is, I'm either running scared or I'm running unopposed. And I don't think you can take these things for granted ever. And I think we have many examples of that in politics and history. So it's a good wake-up call for everybody.
All right. Well, if that had gone as expected, I think we would have been leading with the third district, which was also kind of a surprise in that Joan Hartmann really dominated that race with 60%. Now, Dale, you got the exclusive day after interview with Frank.
I got the exclusive day of interview.
Oh, day of. He was at great
we did that on Tuesday morning.
Great pains to tell Josh and me about that. I'm sorry, I'm talking to Dale. So, I mean, what the hell?
Bad.
I mean, he's around 25%. I mean, he really underperformed, did he not? Or what was the whole story that was going on with the Republicans up there?
Oh my God. I mean, we could spend the whole hour on that. There was the story that Mike Stoker posted today on The Current.
Yes.
About, I saw this coming for a long time ago, and I knew that Frank Troyce was going to lose and he would be a disaster and et cetera, et cetera. And he's right about that. He's right about the outcome. But that article, though you may not know it if you're not on the inside, that article is a dagger pointed at the heart of the Republican Central Committee. Because what happened there was the committee, and by the committee in this case, I mean Chairman McGinnis, because she made the decision. The committee endorsed in June before everyone had even stepped up. And
sounds familiar.
And they endorsed over the objections of the 3rd District Caucus. And they endorsed without Frank Troyes actually having made an appearance before the committee to answer questions, which is unheard of for a local candidate. So, so that article, I mean, that's a very interesting approach. I mean, it's not a very specific article, but I think Stoker is saying something very important about the Republican Central Committee. And as to Frank, when I talked with him yesterday, I got a clearer picture of what his strategy was. And if you noticed in Stoker's article, he points out that Bruce Porter, who's a very moderate Republican, not a MAGA guy at all, Bruce Porter, I think he said raised 800,000. I wasn't sure I didn't know it was that much in his last campaign, and he lost. And the district has changed. It's more winnable for a more conservative candidate than it was, but it's still a Democratic majority district. I mean, District 3 hasn't changed that much. It has changed, but not that much. And so threading the needle there for a conservative candidate is tough. And Troyes, his strategy was, I'm expecting a very low turnout election, and the Republican Party says they're 100% behind me, and they're going to get every Republican to vote for me, and so we could win. And he might have been right about that. That's possible. But that is definitely not how it turned out. And one of the finger-pointing games that's going on right now inside the Republicans is the election night results showed that 1,600 more Republicans had voted than voted for Frank in the 3rd district.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's a lot.
Yeah. So what happened
was there any accountability inflicted by the votes on the county committee? Because I know there were competing slates, and I don't make any secret. I'm kind of a center left guy. I'm an independent though, but I think it's healthy to have two viable Republican parties. So which is why I'm interested in this internal fight for who's going to control things. What was the outcome of that?
I was not privy to these discussions, and I've heard two different stories. I've heard one story from folks in the Valley that they tried to get an alternate candidate and couldn't find anyone who was willing to step up, which wouldn't surprise me. But I've also heard that there were two promising candidates that McGinnis talked out of running. So, but those, I don't have personal knowledge of it, I have to say. That's what people have told me.
Yeah. Gwyn, I think you endorsed Joan. Did you not as well? Or did you not endorse in that district?
I didn't endorse anyone else. I didn't. I focused on the 1st district and.
Yeah. But, I think Joan's performance, kind of goes to a lot of those points that we're talking about. She is into persuasion. She is into talking to people who disagree with her. And she certainly is into working hard, which I think she did. Josh, were you surprised by the how well Hartmann did there?
Yeah, I think I was thinking she'd get 50% on election night, not 60. So I was surprised at how well she did. I hear Dale make a lot, not Dale, I hear Dale explaining Frank make a lot of excuses for why he did so poorly. And the bottom line is Frank is a terrible, terrible, terrible candidate, and there's no one else to blame but himself. Yes, he could have raised $800,000 and still lost, but I mean, we know Jerry. I mean, we talked to him. He just never had a clue of how you run a political campaign. And it's a waste of everyone's time. And I hate to sound like Stoker, but I mean, anyone could have done better than Frank with just a little bit of effort. How much more votes did Bruce Porter get than Frank, raising 800,000? A lot more. It was a lot closer. Like, there is a correlation. And so it isn't as though you can just do these things and waste everyone's time and not attempt to win, right? I mean, it's just frustrating. Joan winning is a huge thing. She worked really hard, right? Everybody loves Joan. Like, there's no issue at all with Joan. Like, she talked to Republicans. Like, she actually did reach out to Republicans. And so she did a really great job. And not to go back to first district, I don't want to short shrift Roy Lee as we're talking all about DOS.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, good.
Roy Lee is one of the nicest, most genuine, kind, authentic, and I'm using those terms deliberately, people in, elected office I have ever met. I mean, he is, he's just so like purposeful and authentic, and he's like a family dude. And on election night, he was not gloating. He was just like level, like I'm ahead and this is good.
Honestly, on election
National.
night, he was serving people in his restaurant.
Exactly. He was
He
working.
was working, and he did not want to jinx it. He was not popping champagne. And also I have a question for everybody. Like, at what point do we start realizing the polls aren't correct? Like, it's been a long time. Like, a lot of elections have gone by and people are stunned nationally, locally. And clearly, I wonder if there's a correlation between social media and people being worried about being outed for what they're saying or who they're voting for. Like, I wonder why it's so hard today to gauge these things. But I do think that it's pretty consistently not in keeping with the outcomes.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. Part of it has to do with cell phones. Part of it has to do with social media. Part of it has to do with people hate pollsters almost as much as they hate reporters. So, who knows? All right. Good on that. I do want to say a word about Janelle Osborne, the mayor of Lompoc, who got in as an independent and really didn't do well. But the next day, she's talking to, I don't know, one of the papers in San Ynez, and she's bashing the voters for not turning out. She's bashing Joan for spending too much money. She's saying that it's, she didn't say it was rigged quite, but, it just was, whatever happened to people being gracious losers? And then Gwyn in the Senate race, we saw the same thing with Katie Porter, who gave up an important House seat, in a swing district to run a, kind of silly campaign for Senate, and then complained because, she didn't like Adam Schiff's, boosting up Steve Garvey, who would have, I think, finished second in any case, just given the Republican vote that's out there. And she's calling it rigged, which is doing nothing but handing ammunition to Trump and the MAGA people for reducing confidence in our elections and in the integrity of our elections. And it just, when you mentioned that about Roy being gracious in victory or defeat, this is how people used to act.
Well, and that's what I would say about your interview, Josh, with
Darcel.
Sorry, with Darcel, is that, it's like, I think, and I have nothing against Darcel, I think she's only ever worked for DOS. I mean, I don't know of any other like grown-up job she's had. I think she's worked for DOS most of her adult life. And I think everyone needs manners. Like, I think what she didn't say in that interview with you was, we're going to wait and see. I mean, the votes are going to tell us who won, right? Either he won or he didn't. But I agree with you. Like, what about, look, we taking responsibility. We didn't run as strong a campaign as we should have run. We overestimated Roy Lee's appeal. We underestimated Roy Lee's appeal. We overestimated DOS's appeal. Or underestimated people's disgruntledness with DOS, and I just think that what I don't understand is, I understand that's hard to do, and everyone wants to look outwards as opposed to look inwards. But when people look inwards from a political perspective, even if it's not genuine, I think that's appreciated. So I don't understand, like, I think it benefits you, it behooves you on every level to be a grown-up, take responsibility. The votes are going to show what they show.
Yeah. Well, on January 6, 2021, it was the first time that the United States has not had a peaceful transfer of power. And I think we feel ripple effects throughout. All right, real quick, in the 4th district, Dale, Bob Nelson won easily the first time he ran with an opponent. And I gotta say, yeah, it's a Republican district, but I thought how easily he won was kind of a credit. He's done a pretty good job. I've been impressed with sort of his pragmatism and his interest in kind of looking for solutions rather than ideology or anything else. So
Yeah,
what do you think of Bob?
I think he's a down to earth guy, as you're pointing out. And yeah, he wants to find solutions. He's one of the people on the Board of Supervisors with a business background. If Roy Lee ends up on there, we'll have a second person with that kind of background. And I think that's very important for the supervisors.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Josh, I guess you really have to credit Dale's 180 switch of mind for the overwhelming victory of Measure A in the city to change the way that contracts for public works projects are awarded. That was not a big surprise, I guess.
I don't know. I was surprised, I guess, at how high the percentage was, that it passed.
That people weren't more mistrustful of.
Yeah, I usually think people are kind of confused, but I guess there wasn't a whole lot on the ballot relative to other ballots. So maybe, they spent some time kind of researching it. So
I have a theory about that reflects well on myself that I would like to share. I was I was told by Eric Friedman that he thinks that my 180-degree about face on that was actually good for the measure because it was so bizarre that it got people interested in it.
yeah.
That's a good theory.
Huh?
That's a good theory.
Dale's flexibility boosts turnout in city. Okay, we got it. We got it. And then real quick on the Senate race, Adam Schiff appears to be headed to be our next U.S. Senator. Gwyn, this issue that really divided and continues to divide Democrats somewhat in terms of the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas and the response of the Netanyahu government, which has been deadly and I think overly violent, according to a lot of people. Schiff was really the strongest pro-Israel guy in that race. I think both Katie Porter and Barbara Lee, were kind of more on the ceasefire now side of things, and Steve Garvey didn't know what the hell was going on. So, how big a factor do you think that is going forward? For example, President Biden's campaign. How big of a split do you think that really is in the Democratic Party, and how lasting?
I think it's a split in the Democratic Party. I don't think Democrats are going to vote for Trump. I think the question is, does it hurt voter participation? Because I think people are frustrated, they're angry. It's a real tightrope walk for Biden, as it should be for Schiff. I mean, the optics are terrible. And yet it's a really complicated situation. And look, I don't think there's any love lost between any of these people and Netanyahu. I don't think anyone's supporting him. I think it's trying to figure out how to get out of this. But it's a terrible situation, as you said, Jerry. It's a very tough situation. And at the end of the day, America does, Israel's an important ally in the Middle East. So we need it to exist. As a Jewish person, I have other reasons I think it's critical that Israel exist. But it is an important ally, and it is a very difficult situation we're being in. And I don't know the solution. I wish I could offer it, but I think it is going to play a role. I think it is dividing the Democratic Party, but I don't think it's going to make Democrats vote for Donald Trump. I think that is by far the greater of two evils in the long run for this country.
And Josh, I know you were putting your Dodger blue on election night when Steve Garvey ended up second in that Senate race. He'll be on the ballot in November, mostly thanks to Adam Schiff's money. But that's I can't help but say that it's just, I look at him, I'm sad. I mean, it's just something,
Garvey?
something he wanted to do as a young man, he talked about, and then just, screwed up his personal life so badly that, 3 or 4 decades later, he finally decides to try it. And he's just, he's lost a few feet off the fastball, to say the very least. But
Yeah, that LA Times story about his family members and kids disparaging him was really revealing, because it goes to that whole thing of these people present themselves one way and then privately their lives are in shambles. And that's the case far too often with these elected officials, or those wanting to be elected officials, for sure. But I'm a Fernando Valenzuela guy from that era, so I would have voted for him, but I could not do that for
is
Steve.
he eligible? I don't know.
I think so. He can't be president.
Finally, let me ask you real quick about Proposition 1, Dale, which was Governor Newsom's latest brilliant idea about fixing homelessness and housing, $6.5 billion in bonds. It started out polling at 68%, but, people found out more about it. There was no campaign against it. But yet that hangs in the balance now. They're still counting votes on that.
Right.
You think, what do you homeless people are just tired of money, forking out money for the issue, or they think it's not well spent, or what?
I think so. I mean, I think the argument about Homeless Inc. has been very successful. The housing first idea hasn't worked. Building condos for homeless people and requiring nothing in return from them hasn't worked. And Los Angeles and San Francisco have both spent billions of dollars on these kinds of programs, and they haven't worked. They have more homeless people than they had before they started. So ordinary people can see the results with their own eyes. And I hope this measure fails. I think it's another bad idea, but maybe it'll take another bad idea before people finally get it.
Yeah, it's a real scattershot approach that can't quite make up its mind what it's for. Of course, the state has already spent $20 billion in the last 5 years on these issues. So why not another 6.5? All right, we're going to leave it there. Go ahead.
Jerry, can you ask Josh? Josh, can you name the opening lineup of Fernando Valenzuela's Dodgers?
The opening lineup, like Garvey, Sachs, Russell, Say, Pedro Guerrero.
Yeah, Say, that's right. Right.
Lopes.
Davey
Dave
Lopes, shortstop, and Steve Yeager, catcher. Yeah, those are my glory days. Before I actually got married and had kids, when I actually had time to watch sports and TV. Oh yeah, I love those Dodgers.
Rick, what's his name out there in left field that became the broadcaster? I can't think of.
Reggie Jackson?
Rick Honeycutt? No, Rick Sutton. No.
Rick, no, I'll think of it.
George
Anyway,
Orda? No.
all right. We'll take this offline, and we'll be back next week with the entire Dodgers lineup from Fernando Valenzuela's first game. All right.
San Fernando Valenzuela.
What's that?
San Fernando Valenzuela.
Yeah.
That's what they.
All right. Dale Francisco, Josh Molina, Gwyn Lurie, thank you very much. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time on Newsmakers.
Thanks, Jerry.